안녕하세요. 집스커버리 잭두입니다. 예. 오늘은 BBC 라디오 팀에서 한국의 부동산에 대해서 이제 궁금하신 부분이 있어서 저희 사무실에 방문해 주셨는데요. 오신 기자님 간단하게 소개해드리고 좀 제가 궁금한 거 좀 물어보도록 하겠습니다. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm John Murphy. I've been in the BBC for 30 years. 30 years. That's a long time. And I usually make documentary programs, usually for radio, sometimes for TV, sometimes for both. And usually I make foreign documentary programs, so I go around all around the world. Actually, I've just come from Taiwan and for a different program, and I'm now here in South Korea, where, just for interest's sake, I grew up as a child. And so I'm always interested to come back to South Korea. And the topic we're looking at this time is housing in a big sense, because housing is an issue for many people around the world, including in the UK. House prices are very high. It's a big issue, especially for young people, and from what I read, it was a big issue for young people in Korea. You know, the price of housing was always going up, and that makes life very difficult. And then now I understand it's going whoop. That also makes life difficult because interest rates are high. But I guess a few months ago, another thing that made it interesting, this whole housing issue, and you may think this silly, but you had big floods, big rain and big floods, and you had some banjia houses which were flooded. And of course, we all know about Paradise, the film, and we saw it in there. So for a British audience and also for a global audience, because I make programs for a global audience, it has an immediate impact, immediate understanding. You see these houses which are flooded, and obviously, sadly, some people die. So you have extremes, poor housing, and you have rich housing. So that was really interesting to examine. I said a lot of things. Sum it up. I can say one. And the other thing is this. So this is a story about housing, but I hope goes beyond housing. It's also about society. It's about the haves and the have-nots. It's about the fact that South Korea has got the fourth largest economy in Asia. Obviously, some very rich people, but some less rich people. So it's examining all that, and it's also examining the impact that housing has beyond just housing. You have a very low birth rate. Perhaps part of the reason has been the housing issue, the pricing of housing, and how difficult it is for young people to get housing. And because of your culture, you can't. Many people feel that they can't have families until they have a house, and so I'm not saying it's the only reason, but it's just part of all this bigger picture.
그래서 부동산 문제뿐만이 아니라
이제 저는 궁금한 게 영국 같은 경우는 제 나이대 청년들이 무엇을 고민하면서 사는지 그런 모습도 궁금하고 부동산적으로 어떤지 지금 상황이 그런 것도 궁금해요.
There are very similar problems. I mean, culturally, we're not the same. So people do have lots of children outside marriage, and you know it's not uncommon. So housing is less of an issue there. But if you live in London, for example, many people's wages are not very high, despite what you might see on television. So it's very, very hard for them, one, to get a deposit for anything, be it even for renting or especially if you want to buy. You have to have a deposit of maybe £30,000. I'm not sure how much that is in one. Multiply that by 1,500 and you'll get the figure. So it's really hard to do that. And then also because the house prices are so high and you can only borrow like 4 or 5 times your salary, which won't be enough to buy a property. So it's for people just starting up, unless they have very wealthy parents. It's almost impossible now in places like London to buy a property. So unless they group together with friends and they all sort of buy together, but that's, you know, maybe a short-term solution.
제가 부연 설명 잠깐 해드리면 런던을 좀 벗어나면 영국 같은 경우에도 조금 좀 나은 형편인데 특히 런던 같은 대도시는 워낙 물가가 비싸고 집값이 비싸기 때문에 진짜 부자 부모를 두지 않는 한은 결국은 자기가 마련해야 되는데 워낙 데포짓을 마련하기가 데포짓 보통 한 5천만 원가량 필요하니까 그래서 이제 하우스를 산다는 건 특히나 아주 생각할 수도 없고 대부분은 런던 같은 경우는 워낙 임금도 상대적으로 좀 이렇게 높지가 않기 때문에 대부분 친구들이나 여러 명이서 하우스를 쉐어한다거나 렌탈을 해서 쓰는 경우죠. 그러니까 집을 산다는 게 이 자기 어떤 그 생활에서 물론 중요한 부분이기도 하지만 그렇다고 해서 거기에 모든 걸 쏟아붓기에는 너무 지금 상황이 어렵기 때문에 되게 우리나라도 지금 그렇게 따라가고 있잖아요.
And also interest rates have gone up. So if you did have a mortgage, your payments each month have gone very high. So that's worrying for many people. And when I talk to my young colleagues obviously I'm a bit older, you can tell, but when I talk to my young colleagues at work, most of them kind of say they will never be able to buy a property. They will have to rent, and they rent. And rent is expensive as well, but they don't have to get that deposit. And they don't have to worry so much about interest rates with rental, but rental prices are also.
사실 우리나라 이상으로 하우징에 관련돼서는 상황이 좀 이렇게 쉽지는 않다.
근데 보통 영국 같은 경우는 집을 살려면 얼마 정도 필요한지.
London is a very special case because it's the capital city and the prices are extremely high. So okay, I'll talk about my house, which I am paying a mortgage. And I bought this house, or started buying it, maybe 10 years ago for 300. And I'm in the suburbs. I'm in a poorer part of town. I'm not in the centre. I couldn't possibly dream of buying in the centre of town. So I'm in the suburbs. I bought it for £329,000. I was lucky. I had a big deposit, but I took a mortgage. I'm still paying the mortgage, but that house has now gone up to maybe £550,000 value
At the moment?
at the moment. So it's gone up in 10 years. It's gone up almost nearly double. But in the centre of London, property will be millions of pounds.
사실 런던 물가나 집값은 뭐 세계적으로 거의 탑이라고 보면.
And luckily for me, at the moment, I've got what's called a fixed rate mortgage. Fixed for 5 years, actually only about 3 more years, but means the interest rate don't affect it at the moment because I set it.
So you
그러면 존 선생님은 그 집을 사실 때 어떠셨는지, 안 떨리셨는지 그런 거.
how did you feel when you bought the house? Then
I felt good.
yeah.
It's good. I have a garden. I have, because it's sort of almost outside London. I have a garden. It's a nice house. I can show you a picture. It looks very old because it was built in 1915. No, it's good. It's good to have. But I think also for British people, owning your house is like owning your castle. 1915.
이게 이제 100년 넘은 집이죠. 그러니까 뭐 리모델링 했겠지. 이 영국은 오래된 집들이 많잖아요.
우리 한국에서는 결혼을 하려면 집이 필요한데 그쪽은 분위기가 어떤지, 뭘 보는지 그런 게 궁금해요.
Young couple,
Yeah.
when they want to get married, what they think to the partner. Example in Korea, as we said, maybe you have the house, you have the car, even what is your job, how much you're earning, something like this. This is very important.
It's still a sexist world, so I think men and women probably think differently. If you have a job, would be good, and if you have a house and all that, of course that's a bonus. But I don't think, generally speaking, based on my experience, that I'm thinking, oh, this person is particularly attractive because they have a smart car. I don't care about the cars, but that's me. There will be some people who do, but I don't. But my son, who's 21 years old, has bought himself a second-hand BMW.
그 30년 동안 BBC 기자로서 일해 오셨는데 그 참 우리 구독자분들이 다 30대 분들이 많아가지고 좀 그 일을 꾸준히 할 수 있는, 정말 좋아하는 일을 찾을 수 있었던 방법이 있었는지 그런 거.
You have been working a long time for BBC, right?
Yes.
For 30 years.
30 years.
What's the motive?
Because it's a very big organization, and in fact, within it, there are lots of different jobs. So I've worked in different programs, like a news program, TV news program. I've worked in many different radio programs. So you have different things. And I have quite an interesting job. Which job takes you to South Korea, Taiwan? I was in America not so long ago. I have the opportunity to see the world and have it paid for.
Can you say to his follower, subscriber,
Yes.
what is the important job?
Okay, the BBC is we call it a public service broadcaster. It's not a private thing. It's our style is different to maybe a private private company, and we feel, and again these are generalizations, but we feel that one, we have to tell the truth. We really must tell the truth. We mustn't be commercially led to just doing commercial stories. So how many other organizations would send somebody to Seoul to do a story about housing? Probably not many, I'd suggest, unless there was a crisis, some big crisis for some reason. I get to do a whole range of stories, and that's another reason why it's interesting, because my job, even though I'm in the same job it changes because it's a different story. I get to find out different things, and then what I have to do is to try and tell an interesting story, which may not be commercial, you wouldn't be able to sell it, but it's still interesting and it informs people. That's what drives me. In the BBC, there are three things. They say inform, educate, and entertain. Those are the three driving forces.
Inform,
educate, and entertain.
지금 말한 대로 세 가지 큰 기능, 예를 들어서 알려주고, 교육해주고, 그 다음에 즐겁게 만들어주는 어떤 좋은 프로그램들을 만드는 어떤 기본적인 가치가 있기 때문에 그 안에서 자기는 충분히 즐겁게 일을 하고 있다. 즐겁게 일하는 게 일단 중요한 것 같아요. 돈보다도 그런 쪽에 이제, 그리고 이제 세계를 다니면서 많이 알리고 그 다음에 듣고 하는 게 자기는 이제 아마 일을 즐겁게 하게 된 동기가 되는 것 같아요. 그러니까 우리 구독자들도 자기가 생각하는 일을 먼저 즐길 줄 알고 뭔가를 거기 안에서 밸류를, 가치를 찾아내면 좋은 성과를 이룰 수 있는 일이.
And you may think I'm biased. There is no organization quite like the BBC. We are the biggest broadcasting organization in the world. And there is no other organisation where I would have the breadth of opportunities to do different things. CNN does one channel, CNN News. Obviously, it does a few other things, but it doesn't do the range of things that we do.
BBC는 CNN하고 비교도 했는데 워낙 이제 하는 영.
Having said that, if I worked for CNN, I'd earn much more money.
그리고
It's this thing called public service broadcasting. It's hard to translate. But I do actually believe in it. As I say, it's not supposed to be commercially driven. It's impartial, and it's doing stories or doing broadcasting, which is kind of supposed to be for the good of society, be it informing them.
Right.
Obviously, politicians don't always like us, because they think we're attacking them if we question them, but that's the nature of the beast.
30년 동안 많은 전 세계를 돌아다니셨을 텐데 지금 세계 각국이 다 어려울 텐데 좀 느끼시는 게 있는지 좀 궁금해요.
I think for the BBC, I've traveled to at least 70 different countries, maybe 80. So that's a lot of countries. And I've been to Iraq, for example, after the war, but it was still a bit of a mess and violent. I've been all over Southeast Asia. There's one story I remember was I've seen good things. I've seen some very nasty things. For example, seeing a mother in Indonesia. This was holding her, I think she was like a 10-year-old daughter. The daughter had axe marks on her head. Somebody had, because there had been intercommunal fighting between two groups of people. And this daughter was in a bad way. You remember that kind of thing. It's not pleasant, but you remember it. I've been to earthquakes where families are digging up their loved ones. You kind of remember that kind of thing. So I don't know whether that's what you wanted to hear, but and then every now and then I remember last time I was in South Korea, we went to the Penis Park.
Penis Park.
In the east, near the east coast. It's a park with lots of. It's hard to forget.
잊을 수 없다고.
저희 채널에 친구들이 보통 20, 30대인데 마지막으로 그냥 하고 싶은 말 있으면 해달라고.
Okay, 20, 30-year-olds, don't think you're any different to any 20, 30-year-olds elsewhere. They, I'm sorry to say, have the same issues. Here and there, good ones and bad ones, but good luck, whatever you're doing. And like him, try to find the meaning of life.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.